Hey y'all, I want to share a spirit-led parenting moment that just happened to me right now, and I learned something from it. So as being a spirit-led parent, I try to listen to God in every situation and hear what He is desiring from us in our family, in our home, and sometimes, and most of the time, it's pretty countercultural. So, for example, today I was playing with the boys and they were playing with their cars, and while I was playing with them, I was also simultaneously cleaning. And I felt this little voice come to my head, and I just poured everything out I just picked up. I felt this voice come to my head and say, oh, you're going to traumatize them because while you're supposed to be present and playing, someone got into the yogurt. You're supposed to be present and playing, you're cleaning, and you're not, you're going to traumatize your kids. And I immediately felt the Holy Ghost say to me, shut that down, shut that voice down. That is not the truth. What I ended up doing, and I do this a lot whenever something is relevant in culture, is I Google what people are defining trauma as. So you've heard trauma this, trauma that. You got so much trauma, you can make a drama. And I looked up the definition, and trauma is the Greek word for wound. Also, I found this definition that basically says that you cannot cope with what you're Are you trying to tell them? You basically can't cope with the situation you went through emotionally. It's nap time, so I can finish the rest of the thought in a little less noise. Yes, so you cannot process things emotionally and you can't cope with it. So you know what? I can agree with that. Without God, we cannot truly emotionally heal. And I think that today everyone's trauma and the way they want to talk about it and live on it is they're wanting to feel that empathy or feel some type of human connection with that, but never truly to the point that they want to do the work to find healing. And I looked up the definition of trauma, and it's the Greek word for wound. And God spoke to me when I looked it up, and He was like, by my stripes you are healed. Nothing else heals us but His sacrifice. And if you don't bring Him into the equation, of course, you're going to consistently be living with a wound. And the way that the Lord kind of brought it up to me was a situation that I went through that was, people would define as traumatic. You wonder why I'm even a Christian still, or still in ministry, because of the way I was treated or the things that I went through. But what I learned through that is when I was going through that process of being healed from that, I often went back to it because I remember how deep I was hurt. But God would heal me, and I would want to keep picking at the wound. You know, if there's like a flesh wound or a wound that there's a scab and you keep picking at it and it keeps bleeding because you're not leaving it alone. Let God do what He can do. And I had to leave my situation alone so that God can fully heal me. So here in our home, we're not going to focus on talking about traumas. We're going to talk about who is the one that heals us, not just physically, but emotionally, and that's Jesus. Because the truth of the matter is, I'm a parent and I'm gonna cause traumas for my kids. That's just automatic. And they're gonna cause traumas for me because that's human relations, right? But the cool thing is, with God, that's what I'm gonna focus on teaching my children is, let's not talk about all the things that were hard that we went through, but let us give that to God. And He's the one that heals us of our trauma. And I also was convicted on this notion that anytime something is a discipline, the world wants to label it as trauma, because the world doesn't like being disciplined. But that is the Christian walk. That's what we are called, disciples, followers of Christ. We are to train our bodies and our minds to be aligned with Him for a greater purpose. And you know, there's some people that are like, oh, my parents made me make my bed every day, and that was traumatizing. So here's the truth. If everything's a trauma, nothing's a trauma. And I'm going to teach my kids that just because something is hard doesn't mean that it's traumatic. Sometimes those hard things are what pushes you to be stronger, better, more equipped for your future. And so I wanted to just share that little thought about what God spoke to me is, if you're a parent, do not let this world guilt trip you into you being a strong parent, a strong disciplinary in a loving way that's helping your children grow, that you're causing any trauma to their lives. Because regardless if you do, and you teach them about Jesus, they're gonna be okay. So I just wanted to share my little thought of what God's leading me in on how I'm training my children to cope with the things that are hard in life, and recognize that just because something's hard doesn't mean that it's bad, because God works all things out for our good. So, and if you are an adult and you're dealing with some hurts and some things that you've gone through in your life, remember, Jesus is the healer, and it's by his stripes we are healed. And yes, you can't cope with your situation by yourself, but if you get him involved, I promise you, you can truly live in the freedom of true healing. And that's what I want for my children, and I pray that for you today too. God bless.